Hi, and welcome to today's 4-Minute Mark. We are in Mark chapter 5, and we are talking about the healing now of Jairus' daughter. And we're going to start at verse 35. While Jesus was still speaking, some men came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Ignoring what they said, Jesus told the synagogue ruler, "Don't be afraid, just believe." Stop there for a minute. Can you imagine somebody ignoring the report of a death? Somebody has just died in your family, and your spiritual teacher says, "Oh, just ignore that report. Don't worry about it. Just believe." And yet Jesus can do that. Jesus can say, ignore the reports of somebody's death. Or, as Mark Twain said, the report of my death is greatly exaggerated. The report of this person's death is greatly exaggerated. Don't worry, just believe. Jesus can say that. Why? Because Jesus is the one who controls life and death. Jesus is the one who is going to the cross to win the victory over death. Jesus is the one who's going to hold the keys to death and Hades. Jesus can say, don't worry about this. Now put yourself in Jairus' shoes. Don't worry. This has been reported that my daughter died. Don't worry, just believe. Wow. Can you imagine the conflicting emotions that he is going through right now? So let's go on. Verse 37. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the synagogue ruler, Jesus saw a commotion, with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. Jesus had an inner circle among his disciples, and that inner circle were Peter, James, and John. They were privileged to see more of who Jesus was. Think of the Mount of Transfiguration. Think of this instance, than the rest of the disciples were. Why? Because Jesus chose to do it that way. Jesus chose these guys as his top lieutenants, if you will, because Jesus wanted to. Jesus is sovereign. That's what he can do. So the rest of the disciples have to wait outside. Peter, James, and John get to come in with him when he's going into the house of the ruler. And Jesus sees a commotion going on. Now, back in those days, when there was a death, people responded to that death by yelling and screaming and wailing out to God, "This is just dead." And that's what everybody did. In fact, people used to hire professional mourners to come in and do that, and to kind of lead the family in that. Now it's beyond our culture, right? How do we deal with funerals? Well, we deal with them where you cry in private in your house, but when you're at the funeral home, you put on a happy face or a stiff upper lip, stand there and shake everybody's hands, and yeah, there's a little bit of tears, but nobody normally is, "Whoa!" in public. But not so back then. They were much more freer with their emotions back then. And so Jesus sees this commotion, this big wailing going on, and he basically says, "Why are you doing this? She's not dead, she's only asleep." And we'll pick up on that tomorrow because we're out of time today. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.